花、音声大丈夫でしょうか？ちょっと私の声がちょっとでもコンミルですよ。今日はですね、先週が何でしたっけ、エースオブシーフードで海の中に行ってたので、ずっとね、海の中で気づいたら戦ってましたけど、なんかそう、平和な世界に行くって言いながら、平和に海を散歩してたはずが気づいたら、昭和アザラシになって軍艦を噛み砕いたり、ダイオウイカさんと戦ったりってしてて、すごいバトルしたので、今日は平和な世界です。なので、ちょっと今日は平和めに、続いた世界って言うんでしょうか？というわけでね、やっていこうと思います。音量がね、ちょっと大丈夫かどうか心配ですけど、あれだったら音量ちょっと上げますんで。というわけで今回はザ・ファーストツリーというキツネさんになって草原を走ったり冒険する世界です。
Hi, my name is David Whaley, and I'm the creator of the first tree. I also voice a character named Joseph. So I just wanted to introduce you to this commentary mode, tell you that you can find interesting things about how I made this game by touching the speech bubbles you see in the world. So I
字
hope
幕
you
を出し
enjoy
忘れ
it.
てますね。あ、いや、字幕ですね。あれ？
Are you awake?
下に字幕出てき
I
ました
thought I
ね。
heard you get up.
Yeah, I'm awake. Sorry, I just can't sleep.
Are you thinking about him?
Yeah, a bit. Usually get back to sleep, my love. I'm fine.
No, it's okay. What else is on your mind?
I don't know. It seems weird, but I had one of the most vivid dreams of my
読むのが
life.
間に合いません。
I saw a fox on a snowy mountain, just looking confused and worried. Those eyes. I can't get those eyes out of my head. She was running in the windy snow, looking for something.
Do you think it has to do with
ど
you
うやら
and
こ
what's been
の、
going on?
I don't know.
内容を聞いて
It
ると、
was
おそら
just a
く、
dream, Rachel.
こ
They're
の
not
私
meant
が
to
聞
make
い
sense.
てになっているのは夢の
Lots
中です
happened
ね。
the past couple days, that's all.
Well, if you're not going to sleep anyway, you should tell me.
で、その夢の話を、女性の方にしているみたいですね。で、どちらに向かえば。これで、走る。特にすごいたくさんアクションがあるわけではないみたいなので、多分フラワーさんに近い世界なんじゃないかなと思うんですよね。こうやってちゃんと指示が出るんですね。でこうやって駆け回って、なんか光が出てますね。あちらに向かうようです。いや、私も完全に初見なので、もうそれしかないですよね。自分の足をだったらちょっとびっくりした。
So it's usually at this point where people say something like, "This is not the kind of game I was expecting." And that happened a lot at PAX West when I showed it. We'd have little kids play it, but then they see a dead fox cub or kit is technically the word, but cub sounds, I don't know, it sounds better. Like Wes Anderson uses it in Fantastic Mr. Fox, so I thought cub would be alright. But anyway,
字幕さんが
having this
仕
game,
事をしていない。
I wanted it to be more serious. This game is based on dealing with the death of my father, which was the hardest thing that's ever happened to me and my family. But I don't want to talk about it here, and I didn't want to talk about it with anybody really to this day still. It's very personal. And that's why I made this game. That's exactly the reason. Because I wanted to get those feelings out and like communicate with people without like talking about it. And so that's what the first tree is. It's me dealing with my feelings, and it was a personal project, and it was just me, and it actually, like, I'm really glad I made it, but it wasn't easy to make, I guess is what I'm saying.
つまりどういうことですか？
So it's usually at this point where people say something like, this is not the kind of game I was expecting. And that happened a lot at PAX West when I showed it. We'd have little kids play it, but then they see a dead fox cub, or kit is technically the word, but cub sounds, I don't know, it sounds better. Like Wes Anderson uses it in Fantastic Mr. Fox, so I thought cub would be alright. But anyway, having this game, I wanted it to be more serious. This game is based on dealing with the death of my father, which was the hardest thing that's ever happened to me and my family. But I don't want to talk about it here, and I didn't want to talk about it with anybody really to this day still. It's very personal. And that's why I made this game. That's exactly the reason. Because I wanted to get those feelings out and like communicate with people without like talking about it. And so that's what the first tree is. It's me dealing with my feelings, and it was a personal project, and it was just me, and it actually, like, I'm really glad I made it, but it wasn't easy to make, I guess is what I'm saying. So not far from her home, she followed that path to something unexpected. She couldn't stay though. She had to find her other two children. So she took that path. She followed it towards something ancient. Something with answers.
あ、どうだ、今のキツネさんもしかして子供？子供さんが亡くなってた？自分の子供さんを探すってことかしら。
The fox looked high and low, searching for any sign of her cubs. Points of light showed the way to this ancient tree. It was as if each one had a story to tell, all their own. The land was trying to tell my story too. I felt like I was right behind her the whole time.
この光の点をたどっていけってことみたいですね。字幕さんの方が大事ですね、これ。大事ですね、これ。これで。この光を集めていくんですね。あれ？上にもある。何箇所もある。この光をたどっていくんですね、つまり。ね？うさぎさん。
The bunnies were added because my wife, Elise, who also voices Rachel in the game, who's also helped a ton to make the game, as we were playing, she just said the world felt kind of empty and not alive enough. So I knew we needed to add some kind of life, and so the bunnies was like the first idea that came to mind. And like most of the game, I used like publicly available assets to speed up production because I was working full-time along with making this game, and we just had our first baby, a little girl named Evelyn. So I was messing with this asset called Herd Sim, and at one point, like the generation script that creates variations of the sizes of the bunny. One time I got out of control and it made like this monster bunny that towered over everybody. And I shared that GIF on Imager and Reddit, and that was a huge hit. It helped definitely gain an audience for this game. But it's hard because this game is like so serious. It's about life and death, not giant bunnies. But I knew I needed something like a shout out to that because it was pretty fun. So if you're able to catch all the bunnies on this map, I think there's around 13, then you'll get a special surprise. So good luck.
操作の仕方があれですと、2段ジャンプができるのはさっき分かったんですけど、捕まえるというか攻撃ボタンがないですね。もしこれゆっくり歩いていかないと捕まえれないのか。あ、こっちはカメラですね。で、そーっと近づいて、違う、これジャンプ。追っかけることもできないですね。本当に捕まえれるんでしょうか、これ。アクション以外に何もないんですよね。どれをしても反応しないので、捕まえるとかないのかしら。ジャンプして飛びかかる。今なんか飛びました。難しいですね。うさぎさんを捕まえるわけじゃないんでしょうね。なんか近づくとくっつくとね、鳴き声はするんですけど、鳴き声がするだけだから、加えたりできませんね。まあ次行きましょう。結構いくつも光がある。ちょっとこれは全部探せばいいんですね、とりあえずは。上から下に下っていきましょうか。よっ。ボール？どこかゴールとかっていうわけじゃないですもんね。とりあえず一番近そうなあの上のから行きましょう。BGM の大きさは大丈夫ですか？音楽がですね、私。ここにも。あそこに光がある。 これなんか埋まってる。
I feel like one of the best ways to make an exploration game feel worth it or to reward the player is to have as many secrets as possible. Like some of my favorite games like Dear Esther and Gone Home and Firewatch. I love those story-driven games. And they're kind of like these mystery boxes where if you put in a lot of effort, if you look closely, the world reveals itself to you better. So there are like secrets in the first tree. See if you can find one of these hidden items by digging around in these unmarked spots around this area.
このぐらいかな。もう少し。
I feel like one of the best ways to make an exploration game feel worth it or to reward the player is to have as many secrets as possible. Like some of my favorite games like Dear Esther and Gone Home and Firewatch. I love those story-driven games. And they're kind of like these mystery boxes where if you put in a lot of effort, if you look closely, the world reveals itself to you better. So there are like secrets in the first tree. See if you can find one of these hidden items by digging around in these unmarked spots around this area.
ね、あ、これ以上いけない。さすがに中すぎるからこれ以上はいけないから。よし、勝ってる方にこっち奥に向かって行ってみましょう。なんか謎の二段ジャンプできますね。
As a kid, did you ever do show and tell in your class?
Yeah, I think I only did it once, when I was in the 4th grade.
思っちゃった。
You know how my life was around then. I wanted to show my class what helped pass the time and distract.
タイムカプセルってありましたね。
I think I told everyone how badly I wanted to be a bird and fly, embarrassingly enough.
私タイムカプセルそういえば埋めた記憶ないですね。
For me, it was another toy from my dad.
私の学校でタイムカプセルってなかったですね。
When I sat down, a group of boys immediately made fun of it. They asked which trash can I found it in, or why an ugly log was my favorite toy. When I got up, I didn't even want to tell them my dad had carved it. I said it was a joke gift my friend had given me.
うさぎさん早っ。
Kids can be so cruel.
Some of them are. I shouldn't have let them get to me, but it did. It's amazing we bounced back at all.
そうやってると前にも行っちゃうから。道だけ見て。なんかある。そう、テレビとかだと結構ほらタイムカプセルの話ってあるじゃないですか。でも自分は行かないんですよ。自分のところではやったことないからもうなんかドラマだけの中の存在と言いますか。これなんか動いてた？気のせい？気のせいだ。でもここになんか光が。よいしょ、よいしょ。これで光が隠れてるんですね。で、柱のあるところに行くとおそらく階段がある。チラッツ。ひどいですね、この世界。あ、なんかある。机？机。 へ。子供たちの遊び場ですかね。多分上の方から来たはずかな。結構な光の柱は遠いですね。もっとたくさん集まってると思ってた。光ってるところに向かっていって、このお話の男性の方のお話を聞いて、顔すると目が覚めるんでしょうか。いやー、登れない。よいしょ。12個。でいくつあるんでしょう。こっちの上にもありますよね。どっちが正解なんでしょう。なんかこれも順番とかなさそうですね。それ光ってるの取りましょう。タイムカプセル、もし私の世代で入れてたとしたら何だったんだろう。多分私の周りとかだとテレビの影響だとおそらくミニリンクとか遊戯王カード、ポケモンカードとかだったんじゃないでしょうか。ほりほり。あれ、またおもちゃ。
Like a lumberjack?
That's one way of putting it. If wood was a canvas, then a carving knife was his paintbrush.
力じゃん。
Even after working a 50-hour week, even after his hands were more splinters than skin,
ああ、なるほど。
he would
お
bring
父
home the
様が
nicest piece of
木
Alaskan
で
weaving seam.
木製の列車を作ってくれたと。
That wooden train was the first toy I can remember, and I loved it. I just knew from a young age I was going to be a
なるほど。
lumberjack, like my father.
父親がまあそういうのを作る木こりさんだったみたいですね。ね、多分こういった掘り出したものが男性の方の多分思い出になっているのかな。こういう感じですよね。この辺とかも多分学校の遊具系ですよね。あ、そっちもある。いっぱいですね、ここ。光ってるの。なかなか広いですね、この世界。でも特に敵さんもいないので平和ですね。音楽が綺麗だし、雪も綺麗だし。なんかジラフアンミカさんとか、フラワーさんに似たものを感じますね。
Usually those kids would leave me alone, but somehow they could tell I was different. They made fun of how far away I lived. They called my dad a sourdough. I was a blabbermouth as a kid, telling my dad stories I made up for hours.
多
But
分
after
順番も
I
あるのかしら、
didn't
会話の。
tell him much anymore.
アラスカ
I didn't know exactly what was wrong, but his best guess was that the toys he carved weren't cool enough. He carved me a tank and tried to tell me what it was like to be in a real tank as a serviceman.
I didn't know your dad was in the military.
Yeah, in the army.
ああ、お父様が
Sad
軍に
thing
入っ
is
て
that
た。
I'd pretty much forgotten until just now. There's so much I still don't know about him.
I'm sorry. He knows how much you love him. You're going to see him again soon.
この方はお父様の記憶をなくしてしまって、 夢の中でそれを追い
A lot
求
of
めて
people
る
have gotten confused why Joseph's father is called a sourdough, and it's not stated outright at the
肝心
beginning
の
of the
会話が
game,
全然何を言っ
but
てるかわ
Joseph
からないん
and
ですよ。
his dad, they grew up in Alaska, and I don't really have a real connection to Alaska except through friends who lived there, and it was also the place that me and my dad were gonna go right before he passed away. But I love the
お父
idea
様
of
が陸
Alaska
軍に
being
いたっ
like this
て言っ
beautiful
てた
solitary
の
place.
で、
But anyway,
父様の
what that
記
has to do
憶
with
って、
sourdoughs, it's an Alaskan slang term about like someone who lives in the backwoods.
こっち
like a
の上は
redneck
ない
in
ですよね。
Alaska. So I thought that was
じゃあこっち
just
で
to
すね。
put some authenticity into the game. I added that word.
こっちの上もあってあるあったあんなところに登れんのこれどこから登ればちょっとマウス感度というかよいしょちょっとカメラの感度上げます。よいしょよいしょ登れた。あそこの上に相変わらず重要部の英語は私がこういう時って英語ペラペラ系 VTuber だったら私が英語が喋れる V だったらもっとあれだったんですね。アヒルさんのおもちゃこれ以上上はさすがにないですね。よかった。もう高いとこから飛び降りると思わず落下ダメージとかないかなっていう心配が。でも狼さんも落下ダメージなかったですもんね。とりあえず多分なんか英語の謎の文章よりも字幕を見る感じですね。あれこの辺はなかったかしら。まだまだあっち。あそこも光ってるような気がしないでもないですけど。上の方が行くの大変なんで、次大変そうなとこから行っちゃいましょう。ずるずるずるずるずるずるって滑ってる。なんで普通の娘さんが2段ジャンプできるのか置いといて。
The older I got, the more I withdrew. I asked myself, why talk to anybody anyway?Why bother when I'm happy by myself? I started drawing a lot, mostly animals I saw in the woods by my home.
子供の頃って確かに結構いろんな絵を描きますよね。私も結構学校でいろんな絵を描いて、私ポケモンの絵を描いてましたね。ポケモンのちっちゃい塩ビ人形って言うんですか？ソフビ？塩ビ？どっちかわかんないけどガチャガチャで出てくるのをたくさん持ってたので、それを見ながらポケモンを描いてましたね。
It's as close as we can get for now.
ここはクレヨン。
I thought it was important to say that yes, I actually did draw this with crayons. And it was just funny to me one day that I was like, I'm working on my game. And I pulled out my little
鼻で笑いましたね。鼻で笑いましたけど何を言ってるかわかりませんが。
I just realized just now that I probably threw away the original. I probably should have kept it and given it away to somebody, but oh well.
おっとっとっとあんなところに。しまった、飛び降りちゃいけなかったのでは？ はい、行けた。よいしょ。私、この配信って字幕でありなしってどうやって設定するんでしょう。いや、いざ字幕出したら英語読み上げてくれるかなと思ったんですけど。ここもなんか、これがさっき上にあった秘密基地の話してたやつですね。秘密基地にポテチとか入れてたって言ってたやつですね。
I feel like one of the main reasons people play small
私も子供の頃はね、秘密基地、確かにみんなよく作ってましたね。
So almost all the vignettes or little stories you hear in this game, they come from my childhood, where I grew up
私の場合、やっぱり
in Central Virginia in the United States.
まあお花の妖精ですから
So
ね。
yeah, that's probably why I
森の
love
中
games
にい
like
て、
this
あれ
so much.
壊れた
You
ブランコ。
explore this open, wide environment and just find interesting things
あ、
because
その
that's exactly what I did as a kid.
森の中に行ったので、森の中に秘密基地を作ってましたね。なんか大きい木の板を誰かが見つけてきていて、それで定規を挟んで屋根を作ってましたね。雨が降っても濡れない秘密基地っていうのが結構当時はなんか好きでした。こっちは光がもうないから。そう、木の板大きいのがあったので、なんか、下にも木の板やって上にも木の板や私が虫さんが苦手なので、ね、下が土のままだと嫌だったんですよね。下が土だとやっぱり虫さんが入ってくるってのがあって、下をまず板とか敷いて、土じゃない状態にして、で、上なんか大きな木にあって、あれも大きい光の柱ないですね。光ってる方に行けばいいですね。とりあえずどっかしら。光の柱ないですよね。あれはさっき見た滑りだ。あそこ真ん中光ってる。とりあえず輝いてるところに光が落ちてるんで。で、まあ、でも秘密基地、そうそう、秘密基地に行ってよく何をやってたって言われたら、まあみんなポケモンやってましたね。図鑑全部揃えましたよ。あれは図鑑、ポケモン金のあれだったんですけど、プレイ時間最大までやって251匹揃えましたね。 れはバニーだから、あれさっきスタートのとこですね。もう上側もうないもんね。そう。みんなポケモンやってて、で、まあ、みんなで、できる限りいろいろ交換してってやってましたね。251匹は頑張りました。こっちの上から見下ろして、あった！あれが光の反射か、それとも光が、玉があるのかってとこですよ。あれ光の反射かな？反射ですね。これ、一番上まで登ってみましょうか。まあ、奥とかあるかもしれない。よいしょ。これで、山を越えた景色っていうのもあるかもしれない。見えない壁ありますね。にゃん？よいしょ。勝ってるところもないような。あれですかね、端っこばっかり行ってたら、ちょっと中央周辺を見た方がいいってことでしょ。あれは、こういうまたなんか、いろんなものが落ちてますけど。ここはキラキラしてるものをとにかく探して、ボールにドーン。何かありそうでないですね。よよおよよおよよよよよよ。まずいですね。すべてが英語なので何したらいいかわかんないまま私駆け抜けてますね。多分光の玉を集めるって話だから、まだまだあるはずなんですよね。怪しいのこの上側ですね。いや、生また。 いしょよいしょ。滑る。足跡がする。あ、でもあった。あそこにあった。この下にもあったのかったので、これは軍のあれですね。あそこに下に落ちてると。をチェック。軍の旗の下ですね。あれこれにあったと思ったけど気のせいでした？あれ？一周しちゃいましたね。さっきの光のところ、あっち方面ですね。わかりました。なかなか難しいですね。難しいと言っても、まあ、この世界、平和なんで、のんびり散歩してるだけでも、これの、下方面、端っこばっかり来たから気づかなかったんですね。もうちょっとな気がする。あ、もしかして今の全部だった？それに出ましたね。なかなか全部見つけるのが大変ですね。冬が終わって、
My teenage years were full of sketching, angst, and trouble.
あ、子供の頃から10代に成長した。
Maybe just forgettable. I guess that gave me a sense of freedom. So I hung out with crazy kids, doing crazy things, even though I mostly just watched the
郵
chaos.
便箱に花火を入れて、時計窓を割ったり、いっぱい悪
Fireworks in
い
mailboxes.
ことしてますね。
Roadkill in people's garages. Break windows of the barber shop in Anchorage. My dad was furious, but he was so busy working he couldn't do much to stop me from going out.
I think being an adult means there's no one to stop you making hard decisions. He had to make a living, and he couldn't be in two places at once.
Yeah, I realize that now. But at the time, I was sure he was more interested in growing his business than what was going on with me.
いたずらがなかなかえぐい。だからここで花火。
This is the level that I showed at PAX West, which was a crazy dream come true that this hobby project was being shown next to all these amazing indie games. So I decided to show this level because it's smaller, there's like some jumping puzzles, and I thought it was a good entry into the game. But the one thing I can't seem to forget is right before we open to the public, there was an indie dev superstar. Like, you've definitely heard of his games. And I was like terrified. He wanted to try it out. So I said, of course, like, please give me your feedback. And he was super nice, super talented, of course. But this embarrassing bug happened, which I'd never seen before in my life, where when he dug the item up, he jumped right after, and it created the dust cloud to permanently be on the rest of the level. It wouldn't turn off. So it looked like this fart cloud following the fox as it just kept running with this beautiful music and serious voiceover. And it was horrible. I think about that every time I look at this level. But, you know, I was able to fix it, so I'm glad someone could at least find that bug.
あ、帽子。うさぎさんじゃなかった。そしたら、何？また机。
He was working another late night, and my friends were over, saying how bored they were and how they had come all the way out to my house for nothing. One of them mentioned how that old, ugly beyond belief truck was still in the garage, and how we should take it for a spin. I was only 15, so I kind of fought it for a while. The next thing I knew, we were careening around the mountain path,
ああ、トラックに乗ってはしゃいでたってことですかね。
while my dad's cringeworthy bluegrass blared out the speakers. I drove while my friends were in the back of that yellow and purple truck, throwing beer bottles and trash at anything remotely interesting. Felt like I was soaring in the air
ああ、
with
警察は
wild
車止め
wings.
てきた。
But all good things have
だから
endings.
パトカーか。
A cop outside of Eagle River pulled us over after he saw us send a bottle rocket into someone's yard. What followed was a long night of talking to disappointed adults
あれ
and
届
feeling
かない。
smaller than ever.
おじさんです。ウェスカー。あ、ウェスカーさんじゃなかった。ただサングラスしたおじさんでした。え、蝶々がなんかついた。え、あ、蝶々さんがついてるジャンプがすごくなる。一回だけ？それとも距離とか限りあるんでしょうか、これ。
I always wanted this game to be very
なるほ
meditative
ど。
and relaxing, but I know there's a balance between keeping the player's interest.
ここでジャンピ
So
ング
I
ってことは、
added this butterfly jumping mechanic just to like spice things up. I
まあ、
used
蝶
a
々は使い
plugin
なさいっ
called
てことで。
Playmaker for Unity, which in a visual editor lets you do interactive things, which is perfect for me because I do come from a film and
まあ、
design
岩の
background.
上で、
But on the flip side, I really wish I was good at code because this jumping mechanic, the jumping mechanic in the whole game actually is
光を取り
frustrated
損
a
ねた
lot
ん
of
だもんね。
players. But hopefully I've been able to fine tune it, so it should feel a lot better now. I would just hate that this meditative game would get
一
frustrating.
応指示が出るからまだあれですね。二段ジャンプしなさいって指示が出た。
So hopefully people can just focus on the world and the story.
うん、そしたらここで。今の絶対違うところで使った。使いましたね。よいしょ。低いジャンプもできないから、これで、こう乗ってから、なるほど。で、上に登っていく。ですね。なるほど。今回は結構道なりにちゃんと出てますね、光が。この蝶々は違う。危ない。ここにもあった。あ、こっちは何もない。これ以上はいけない。 あ。ってことは、そこの岩の上に多分蝶々さんがいて、で、で、惜しい。ここからのあと少しが難しい。絶妙に届きません。もしかしてこの岩、やっぱり。なるほど。なるほど。余裕で届くと思わせといて。取れました。そういうことですね。こんなところに。この上にもありますね。
After he drove me home from the police station, I blew up at him, saying how I never wanted to be like him, how I was gonna be someone and leave that hick icebox for good. He just looked forward at the road with tired eyes. I took out that bluegrass tape from the cassette deck and chucked it out the window. In my sage teenage wisdom, I thought I proved the ultimate point. But my dad had a different idea. He slammed the brakes, slowly bowed his head while gripping the steering wheel, and finally looked at me. All he said, like it was a polite request, was, "Make this right." I sat there in silence, fuming, but I eventually got out and combed every square inch of the woods, muttering profanity after profanity. I found it 30 minutes later, near a small waterfall off the road. I went back to the truck, put the wet tape back in, and sure enough it worked. We didn't speak another word to each other the rest of the night.
Wow, I knew you were a crazy teenager, but...
It's hard to believe, isn't it? It surprises me too. It's like I didn't really know who that kid was back then. I bet my dad thought the same thing over and over. It's almost like he was saying, "Make this right," to himself more than to me. My friends would laugh about that night and talk about how crazy it was, and I laughed along, pretending it didn't bother me. But it did. I imagined my friends growing old in the bush and able to find that thrill in those godforsaken ice fields. It's like those mountains were a literal wall, keeping me from leaving, where all I would have to look forward to are lumber yards and evening beers. I had to climb over.
今の上がり方おかしくないですか？今
You may have noticed there's a little pond here, and believe it or not,
今
I
頭で
tried
登りましたよ。
everything I could to get swimming working in this game, and I just could not do it, unfortunately. And so all the water in this game you can just stand in, which is, it still like bums me out, but the systems were not working, it was buggy. So I just had to throw it out, which, you know, I think it's okay. Like, I wish it was there, but again, the focus of this game is on the story.
今絶対届かなかったと思ったのに。
My biggest hope for the players that are playing is that they realize how similar these two parallel stories are of this fox looking for her missing cubs.
もう蝶々2ついるとジャンプがパワーアップさらにしてたま。
And so I try to add little touches in the voiceover and in the environment to help draw those parallels, even if they seem totally dissimilar. A big example is the truck, for instance, that Joseph grew up with. It's purple and yellow like the butterflies for the fox. So I tried to add as many touches like that throughout the story as possible.
滝がボボボボボボボボボボって言ってます。にゃ泳いでも別になんもないですね。あの蝶々さんを取ることが何かあるでしょうか。よいしょよいしょ。これ蝶々を取って蝶々を取ってもしかしてもしかしてさらに蝶々を取ってから登る場所だったとか。これ蝶々マックスなんで多分ジャンプが一番すごい気がするんですよね。マックスなのかな。でも他残ってるとこないですよね。あ、でもこのジャンプ絶対そうですよね。そういうことですよね。今ので合ってた。そのために3匹いたんだ。なるほど。
If there was some way I could take my love of drawing and turn it into a way of escape, nothing would make me happier. I wanted to create instead of tearing trees down. I wanted to move to the lower 48, not because I hated it there in Alaska, but I hated the idea of it. It's like all of that spite inside me had created this monster which followed me around my whole teenage years. I put so much energy into doing what others didn't expect of me. Why did I do that?
There's one fact you're forgetting, though. If you didn't have that fire in you, we probably would have never met.
You're absolutely right. Maybe the destination is all that matters in the end. But then why am I awake? Why am I seeing this fox go on her journey? And why can't I stop thinking about my dad?
起きて夢を見ているってことですか？この方。まあ、光ってる場所に向かえば。霧が出てる場所に行けばいいんでしょうか。今何個アイテム集めたか わからないですね。まあでも、こっちで合ってましたね。この光の玉の数ってなんか影響するんでしょうか？あ、でもこういう大きい木っていいですよね。山に住んでたことあるけど、木ってまじまじと大型で見たことないんですけど、大きい木ってやたら大きいですね。オープンワールド。
I did want to do something a little different with this level. I wanted it to be more open world feel, and that there was something blocking your progress. So it did encourage people to look closely and see how to unlock this blocked way. And I do like just walking around this level and listening to the beautiful music by Josh Kramer. His work really sets the mood for the whole game.
左の奥にもあっちにもあるんですけど、ここにもあるから。まずこっちですよね、多分。よいしょ。
I don't think the first tree could work at all without the music by
こ
Josh
れ、
Kramer.
もしかして、
And his music, it's actually
操作の仕方と音楽
publicly
について
licensed,
が
and so it was
歌ってらっしゃる
affordable for
感じ
me
ですかね。
since this was a hobby project. And it's something I like to tell new indie developers all the time. Like, you can't afford that composer. You can't afford a full-time
Nice.
programmer. You need to cut corners and finish your game. And the way to do that is to use these amazing publicly available assets that anyone can
ナイフが出
purchase
てき
and
ましたね。
license. And so his music is incredible, and I actually haven't talked to him that much. I've just emailed him, but his music was nominated for Most Emotional Music at the Emotional Game Awards in France, and he's just a really nice guy. And I think there's so much amazing content out there that if you're thinking of making a game, like, look around and see what you can make work on a tight budget, because it worked really well for the first tree. Even at my most distant, at the times when I detested him the most,
反抗期。
he kept reaching out. For a year straight, he asked me every week when we were going camping. I thought he was just dense. Eventually, to shut him up, I agreed. We carried out the worn lawn chairs from the garage and set up a cinder block campfire at the site we'd always used behind the house. We walked down the mountain path, talking in the warm sunshine we only got a couple months of the year. Those 3 obsidian rocks shimmered alongside the shore, almost like
なるほ
sparklers
ど。
pressed against a dark
こう
window.
光が下がったタイミングで伏せ
I'll
てっ
never
て
forget that
な
wet stone on my feet, or how those massive mountains looked even bigger in the lake's reflection. I felt small, but grateful. As the sun set, my dad found something I hadn't seen for a long time. The tree where I'd made my first carving when I was 6. I hadn't even carved it. My dad had helped me, but I still called it my tree. Something about seeing my name there made me
ま
open
だい
up,
けない。
and we talked about everything that night in that old camouflage tent. I told him how much I love sketching and design, and how it would be a
あ、そこ
dream
にあ
to
った。
study architecture in Seattle. I told him how I didn't get along with my friends much anymore, but that I didn't mind being
そこにもあ
alone.
った。
He told me he was there for me, and he joked that if all he had to do was write my name on a tree to finally get me to talk, he would have left me carved logs with novels on them in front of my room every morning. I don't know why it took me that long to realize it, but it was then I knew how much he had sacrificed for me.
こ 光の筋のところに行って、とりあえず回収してくる必要があるんですね。その下で光ってたら気づかないですよね。あっちにある。結構広いですね、ここ。よいしょ。
On our property, there were old abandoned pieces of a shed and car long left unused. I used to ask him all the time who those people were that left all this junk, and I'm sure he got so tired of hearing it that he made up some elaborate stories how a brown bear ate them and haunted the woods afterwards. What's funny is I think it made those people seem more real, growing up thinking they were still hanging out like they couldn't say goodbye. I used to tell my friends how I could swear I saw spirits move near the water, and that always freaked them out. I guess it didn't bother me, because the way I saw it, they were normal people with old cars and sheds, just trying to figure out how to survive and be happy in the middle of nowhere. It was a cool thought that they didn't want to leave, but you know, I was a weird kid.
Well, you had good company since those ghosts like living in a place where they were brutally devoured.
ああ、こっから持っていくんですね。
Almost all stories follow the same kind of structure, and it starts with an inciting event, and then there's rising action, and then there's a climax, and then there's falling action. And it's actually really difficult to make an interesting story where you only hear these two people talking, and it's spoken through a dream that's already happened. And the most of the action is about this animal that isn't directly related to this couple at all. So I don't know what I was thinking, but my hope was that it would create some interesting things and connections that I didn't see before. And that was kind of the whole exercise of making the first tree.
この光を、この光がしゃがんだタイミングで、吸収と。次は、こちらですね。なかなか、広いですね。なんかこれあれですね、この男性の方がどんどん成長するっていう話なんですか。反抗期っていうのは私あんまなかったですね。妖精には反抗期ってないので、妹の方がもうあれだったんで、私がそういうのなかったですよね。あ、びっくりした。木の枝だった。敵さんいないのはずなのになんか、思わず今ジャンプで寄ります。でもこれしっかりだ。あ、いや、あそこにある。来てみる。そう、反抗期というか、まあ、兄弟と喧嘩してしまったり、お父様と喧嘩というわけじゃないですけど、まあ、会った時とかには、なんでみたいな時ありましたけど、私も、日記を書いてたんですよ。日記を。毎日。まあ、たまにサボった日はまとめる日やりましたけど、毎日、まあ、3年ぐらいずっとつけてまして、 で、ちょっとこなしがあっても、そこにももう一個ある？取ったですよね、あれ。あれ違う？矛になった日でも日記を見てると落ち着くんですよね。あれがないからもう一個あったんだ、ここに。矛になっても日記を書いてるうちに、なんて言ったらいいんでしょう。変じゃったわけじゃないんですけど、なんか落ち着くんですよね。なんか、って言って書いて、文字に起こしてるうちに、なんかこう、なんですよね。あれでも取ってある。3分の2取ってある。だから私の場合は、それ日記とかでスンってなってたから、家族とぶつからずに済んだんですよね。あれ、じゃあこの1個は取ったもので、で、1個の光は、火の壁の奥なんですよね。およよおよあり取った。何でしょう、反抗期になんなくても別に、大きくはなれますからね。木で見えません。でもこの道に出た。この道ってことはこれスタートの最初の道ですよね。あそこに大きい枝があって、でいい？あれと右に行ったから、ってことは左？そんな気がしますね。やっぱりあった。皆様子供の頃って何が流行ってました？ゲームもそうなんですけど、ゲーム以外でのほら遊びってあるじゃないですか。今でこそ公園で子供たちが遊ぶってないですけど。
My dad built a lot of stuff in his free time. If he wasn't watching fly fishing or reading Tom Clancy novels, he was carving something. He made tons of birdhouses. Not that he was into bird watching, but I think he really missed working and adding on to the home.
私の場合何が流行
He
って
couldn't
たか
afford
な？
the time to build onto our own house. He would have to settle with watching birds move into their little homes. We kept
私たち
an
の
old
上
mattress in
の
the
世
bed
代の
with
方
a
々
lovely
があ
red
れですか
truck.
ね、
So we would drive it deep into the woods, and then watch the birds fly into their houses while the sun set.
そ
Usually
う
it
そう、
was
ミニ四
accompanied
駆
by
と
venison
卵っち。
jerky or a cold Coke, but not a lot of talking, which is how we both
卵っ
liked
ちも一すごい値段になってたみたいですね。なんか白が3万、銀が5万、金なら10万ぐらいで売れるとか言われてた噂があったんですけど、私白でしたね。結構白もレアなやつだったんで。
Earlier I said I just love going through video games and exploring, like looking at every nook and cranny and just trying to find little details. And I think that started because in middle school and high school, I would make mods for my favorite games, namely Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, and Far Cry. And I loved like this huge world of mod makers who would make these levels and it'd be like the most random creative things. And I would just love exploring, usually multiplayer
そう、なんか、
levels by
高かったらしいん
myself.
ですけど、
So even
私
though
の場
I
合
went to
は、
college
地方
for
の、
fun, before that, like before high school, I was making video games and mods.
まあ、田舎
It
の
was- it
方
was
の
my
おも
favorite
ちゃ屋
thing
に
in
行っ
the
たら
world.
普
I
通に売っ
made
て
a
たんで
ton
す
of
よね。
different levels. I made an abandoned space hotel with a dance floor and cafeteria.
まあ、
I
ただ、
made a haunted
小
campground
さい
with
子が使っ
cabins
て
and
たので、
tents.
まあ、当然
I
ぶ
made
つけ
this
たり
whole
して、どんどん
city
価値
with
がな
like
くなってま
the
したけ
first
ど。
ever day-night cycle with running showers and stuff in the hotel.
あと、
and
私、
the
あと、確か
apartment
UFO キャ
buildings.
ッチャーか何
And
か
I
で、
just
映
love making
画
those
の
mods.
卵っ
And
ち
I
プロ
think
ット
that
してまし
carries
たね。
over to my game, the first tree, and also the one before that, Home is Where One Starts, which is very
英語の卵っちだ
exploration,
と、
just looking around and appreciating the
映画の
details.
親父っちっているじゃないですか。おじちゃんの、波平さんみたいな偽物もありましたね。
We were happiest underneath the evergreens. We decided it was time to finally map out the hundreds of acres we lived on, just to pass the time during the summer.
英語版の卵っ
It
ちっ
was
てあったん
only
です
free
よ。
in
確
the
か
evenings,
紫
so I would spend the day wasting time on dial-up internet and sketching, and then we would rush into the woods, pen and map in hand, before
ね、
evening fell.
なんか育てたいけど、見たことない卵っちが欲しいっていうと、
green glow on the mountainside.
お父様が
We would
育てる
finish
の
our
がす
route
ごい上
underneath
手
the
で、
twilight sky.
上手
Sometimes I was lonely during ththose
だ
summer
っ
days,
て親父っちを育
but
てて
there
ま
was
したね。
comfort in the routine.
A lot of teenagers aren't looking for the daily grind, though.
親父っちって
There's
私
nothing
は
wrong
全
with
然
wanting to get out,
思い出せなかった
leave
です。
your
あ、ラ
childhood
ジカセ。
You wanted to progress, to make something of yourself.
Yeah, you're right.
で、親父っちってのはいるんですけど、
I'm sure it's the same as how I left it. Then why does it
あそこにあ
feel
っ
so
た。
different?
I doubt you're the only adult to have looked back and asked that question.
そう。英語版だと親父じゃないんです。英語版だと親父じゃなくて、すごいなんかもう、顔が外国人になるっていうか、サムッチって言われてましたね。誰ですかサムって思うんですけど。ここ登るのかにゃ、あの上に登りたい。そう、サムッチとか言えばすごい顔が、勝手に喋る外国人みたいな顔したたまごっちになったんです。親父っちさんとはまた違う意味で気持ち悪いって言っちゃった。いたんですよね。どっから登るんだろう。おろろろろ。あ、岩の中にいました。雨の岩と、なんか今メキメキメキって言ったら怖いんですよ。なんです？ そう、偽物本当多かったみたいですね。私のお友達も言ってました。ああ、そうそう、恐竜のやつとか、そうそう、ありました、ありました。なんかで、たまごっちと確か同じぐらいの時に、戦えるバージョンで出た、あ、デジモンだ。確かデジモンってあれでしたよね。通信達成みたいなのありましたよね。本体と本体合体させるみたいにして相手通信。私、それの下手でいつもスカルエモンになってたんですよね。私いつもスカルグレーモンになっちゃって、妹が確か、ガルルモンとか成功してましたね。デジモンさんもたまごっちさんも確か、うんちって言うとあれですけど、おトイレ、うんちが溜まっちゃった時に流すと、デジモンとかたまごっちさんごと流れてませんでした？で、流れたと喜ぶってなりましたよね。すごいなんか思い出してきた。すごい懐かしいのが。私、たまごっちの、確かゲームボーイか何かであって、ゲーム学研たまごっちの2か1か忘れたんですけど、確か最初に育てたたまごっちが確か亀になったんですよね。ゲームボーイのやつで。お勉強とかさせるだったんですけど。確かその亀っちが死んだ日の夜、すごい本気でやってましたね、私。布団で寝ながらも亀っちって言って、ガチ泣きしてたみたいですね、私。妹がよしよししてたのが覚えた。たまごっちでガチ泣きしちゃってたんですね。いやー、当時は私もピュアでした。たまごっちで泣くってなかなかあれでしたね。妹がドン引きしてましたね。
The perpetrator stood nearby, unfazed, like nothing was wrong. My dad is dead, and he's never coming back, Rachel.I can tell you these stories, but I can never reminisce with him again. He can never hold a grandchild that we'll probably never be able to have. I can never talk to him again, and I'll never be able to say I'm sorry for everything.
そして、たまごっちの会話してる間あれですね、お父様がなんか、殺されたって話してらっしゃいましたね。そしてここになんかまた横たわってらっしゃいます。ザ・ウルフ？確か全部で3匹。2匹を探して、1匹がここで、あと1匹しかいない。ザ・ウルフ。
It was really important to me that the wolf in this story that takes the fox's cubs, that it wasn't explained at all. Like, it's just this this entity that's in the background. And of course, it's supposed to represent something bigger than a wolf or even the fox. It's supposed to represent like the specter of death. And it comes when you least expect it. There's no justification. He's just there, always watching.
子供の形なのですね。でも、あと1匹いるはず。あと2匹いる。あと1匹どこかに。形を取るのですかこれ。なんかあれですね、フラワーさんもそうですが、3つ目のステージぐらいでいきなりなんか話が一気にちょっとダークな感じになりますね。フラワーさんもいきなり闇の世界に入りましたし。しかし一本道ですね。狼さんを追っかけるんですね。あそこに光ってるんだ。実際動物さんとしてすごい移動距離ありますよね。すごい走って移動するから、体力すごいですよね。
I need to go to bed. I just can't talk about this anymore. Good night.
つまり、この男性のお話だと、やっとお父様のことを思い出している。お父様は実は殺されてたみたいな話ですかね。えらいダークじゃないですか、私、平和に草原を散歩する狐さんのつもりだったんですけど。えらい悲しいんですけど。ここは一体。
Joseph, you can't go to sleep feeling like this. I'm sorry for everything, and I know you need space, but I'm here for you. You don't need to feel so lost.
Joseph,
have I ever told you what my mother was like?
Hello, my name is Elise Whaley, and I was the voice actress for Rachel. I'm also David's wife. So that was convenient for
あ
working
ジョセフの
together.
妻の
I was actually the voice actress for his
Rachel.
first game, Home is Where One Starts, and I guess that I did a good enough job that David wanted me back, so I did the voice acting for this one as well.
漢字の部分が全部英語だから何も伝わってこ
Coached
な
me
いのが
through it
辛い。
because I'm pretty inexperienced when it comes to that. Home is Where One Starts was my first time ever doing voice acting of any kind. And we watched a lot of trailers of
英語がわ
movies
か
we
る
liked
有
to
識
get
者
the
の
voice
方
right of female leads who were talking in the trailer and try to mimic that and bring that into the game. So that had the right kind of feel and the right kind of atmosphere for the voice. My character actually is the same character from Home is Where One Starts. If you've played that game, you probably connected that together. And this is her probably about 15 years later, maybe 20 years later, in this game. I was happy to revisit the character of Rachel. We kind of leave her in an ambiguous spot in Home is Where One Starts. It definitely ends on a hopeful note, but there's not a lot of details. And in this game, you see that she's able to move on through a lot of her issues that she had from her abusive home and be able to start her own family and start a new cycle without that abuse, which I think is really inspiring.
家族はちょっとおかしかったっていう話ですね。っていうのは聞き取りませんでした。私、英語は、フラワーとフェアリーとコニファーしかわかりません。コニファーってのは針葉樹という意味です。これは一体、鹿？
You know what it's like not to have a mom at home. And you know how hard that made my childhood. What helped me was watching the birds in the morning before the school bus came. I thought that my mother was one of those birds. And it made me want to be free like her. My mom taught me how to fold origami cranes while she was in the
なんだ
hospital.
この方もお
So
母
I
様がい
told
なかったと。
myself I would fold one every day until I could fly myself.
私もそういう時期ありましたけど。そうです。今度は女性の話です。
I think we both have always loved animals, and for me that love started with a dog. Sometimes this Rottweiler would come up to our property line and wait at the fence for me, but only once in a while. I was sure to check every day immediately after school, and it usually ended in disappointment. I would even steal money from my passed out dad just so I could buy these off-brand dog biscuits. Even when she did stop by, she never went beyond the fence. Why was she so scared?
So it's always interesting working with your spouse because, especially on a creative project, because they want your feedback, but it's something that's also dear to their heart, and they're dear to your heart, and you definitely don't want to hurt their feelings. So I was a little nervous when David asked me, he had finally finished writing the script, and he asked me to go over it and see what I thought. And I had minored in English. I majored in art, but I minored in English, so I felt like I had a little bit of experience. But I was definitely like a little scared because you don't want to be too harsh, but you also want to be honest. And it was the biggest relief when I read the script, and I was like, oh, good. My husband's a good writer. I don't have to change that much about this, just a few like grammatical things. And that was just like the biggest relief for me because it can be a tricky balance working with your spouse and making sure that that honesty is there, but also that love and the support is there as well.
何笑うてんねん。何笑うてんねんですね。英語で何言ってるかね。なんか笑ってるからもう何笑うてんねんって言えないんですけど。多分字幕だけでもとりあえずどうにかストーリーはわかります。
Of your dad in almost every way, except he was in the military as well. He coped with alcohol of every kind. The trailer started falling apart, he got angry, and I withdrew. More and more I became the weird, quiet kid who made lots of origami birds and carried dog biscuits around. I think we were pretty similar when it came to being the weird kids. And that same sincerity in college was one of the reasons I was so drawn to you. Life got worse and worse. And at one point, I really didn't think I could survive another day with my soul still intact. I had no real friends, let alone neighbors, since we lived in the middle of nowhere. I
お父
should have
様が
talked to
ま
my
あまあ
teacher,
まあ
but I was scared what he would do if he found out. As I waited for the school bus one morning, I walked around until I found something in an abandoned shed. Something I can't put into words.
お母様がいなくなってお父様がまあ
So we're talking about homes where one
なんて
starts
言ったら
a
いいんでしょう。
lot.
お
So
父
if you
様
haven't
が
played that game, maybe this doesn't make as much
まあ
sense. Or maybe this
DV
is
と
a
言い
little
ますか
plug
そう
that
い
you
う感
should
じの
go
お父
play.
様だったみたいですね。
But in that game, it actually features one of my artworks. I work as an artist and paper cutting, actually. And David used one of my artworks as a graffitied stencil in Home is Where One Starts that's against the wall of this shack.
お話ししてる
And
間
it
ちょっ
actually
と
shows up again in the first tree, just a fragment of it.
追いついてまでなの
First
で
tree,
ちょっ
the
と
title actually comes from one of my artworks that I made back in
妖精ステップ
2015,
を踏
I
み
want
ま
to
す。
say. And I made this artwork while I was
これは
pregnant
妖
with
精
our
のステ
first
ップで
child.
す。
And it had a lot of meaning for me, and David actually helped me come up with the title. And he asked, because I was really struggling, I was like, I have no idea what to call this, and I always go to David for title ideas and to bounce ideas off of him, and that's like the only way I can ever come up with a title is by talking with him. So we were talking back and forth and looking at this artwork, and he said, well, what kind of like movies or shows were you watching while you're making the artwork? Because my work's pretty tedious, so sometimes I'll watch a show or do some Netflix binging while I'm creating it. And I was like, oh, I actually watched Tree of Life a ton. And then we're like, Tree of Life. And we started thinking more about that and then arrived at the first tree. So it started off as one of my artworks and then became a part of David's art, which I think is really cool that we were able to share that title.
ね、はい。
I summoned courage I didn't know I had, and I broke into my dad's room and found the key to the shed where he had locked my bike. I'll never forget that feeling, as the wind rushing by my ears as the sun rose over fields of wheat. I was flying for the first time. I biked as far as my legs could take
だ
me
から
until I
こ
found
の
a
方
house
は
that
自転
felt
車で
friendly,
逃げて遠くまで行っ
and
て
that felt like home. Those strangers helped me in so many ways.
保護し
And
て
if
も
it
らう
wasn't
こ
for
とがで
them,
きたと。
I wouldn't have found my foster family. And if it wasn't for my parents, I wouldn't have met you.
Yeah.
You have strength, Joseph, and you're not as alone as you think.
It's all just so pointless. Just waiting for life to happen. It's like having the home I always wanted is cursed out of my reach. The thought of being a parent myself. How could I do that when I couldn't even be a good son? I'm sorry. I know what you're saying. I just don't know how things will work out. These quiet hours will turn into years. We'll wonder which roads passed us by.
Then we'll forge a new road together. Besides, I discovered for myself that one fateful morning where any hopeful road leads to. There may be thorns and mist, but it always leads to the same thing.
And what's that?
Family.
I'm so glad that you're part of
あ、
my
ラッシェルじゃなくて
family.
レイチェルさんですね。
And I'm
ラッ
glad
シェル
you're
さん
part
じゃ
of
なくて
mine.
レイチェルさんですね。
A question I get a lot is why a fox? And it ties into just how important family is for me. And Fox is actually a family name from my wife's side, from Elise. And she always heard about the legacy of the Fox family. And because of that, growing up, it was her favorite animal. She even made these 2 wooden foxes for our wedding cake toppers. So I thought it would be cool to have that animal in the game while these 2 people are having this conversation in the middle of the night.
今のお話だと、男性の方は自分が親になれるのかっていうのに不安を抱えてらっしゃる。ということですよね。で、立派な、息子で入れなかった自分が立派な親になれるのかと、苦悩する男性と、それを支える女性。全部でいくつあるんでしょう、この光。なるほど。あんなことがあってはって最初の方に女性の方言ってたんで、なんかそういう悪い出来事もあったんでしょうね。眩しい。でも光の中へ駆け抜けてってますね、だんだん。いきなり暗い。
The fox knew her last cub would be waiting for her at the first tree. She was almost there. The rain cascaded onto the jade valley where the entrance to the tree was. Life was protected there, because that's where life began. It was now only a mother and a daughter left. Items from my life still dotted the ground as she moved closer to her destination and destiny.
それ木の下に、始まりの木の下に子供はいると。駅に落ちてしまいました。光を取るんだったらこれ道を間違えましたね、私。まあ、しょうがない。
Usually what catches people's attention of the first tree is the visuals, of course. And I was inspired by a lot of people making these levels. The second level is inspired by just these beautiful autumn photos of a real forest. And this level, the Jade Valley, is inspired by the artwork of Heather Penn, who did the Overland games. I just love those greens with a lot of gray in it. I love the strong vignettes in the corners of the frame.
この上
And
ない
of
です
course,
もんね。
this environment pack was made by
多分戻れないから、
very talented Swedish
重要アイテムは
designer
わざと置いてない
Mikael
みたいですね。
Gustafsson. And of course, his initial designs inspired me, and I was able to build off of that. And I'm really grateful that he allowed his environment
これは
pack to be made publicly available.
写真
At the end of high school, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Drive. I looked into the best architecture schools on the West Coast and got a dose of reality when looking at other students' portfolios and the high cost of tuition. I still wanted to be something, to be the next Alvaro Siza, and to make those thousands of sketches worth something in my grand history. But now even an internship sounds impossible. Siza helped me understand how essential emotion is in architecture, and he also said light is the real composer of space. I like to think these glints of light, like not finding a job or even a strange dream about a fox, are something I should be thankful for, even if the illuminated space is something I'm less than comfortable with.
この光る彼にとっては希望の道しるべってことですかね。建物。あ、建物が見えますね。
By now, you've probably caught on to some of the themes I love to explore in these stories. And the big one is of this tree, the first tree on Earth. And a lot of people have asked me, what does that mean? Why a tree? And basically, it boils down to this delicate balance between nature and its relationship with life and death. And I love these stories where they put like these microscopic relationships, like something of like a father and a son, and juxtapose it next to this epic story of like the creation of the universe and the first tree on Earth, and how they can be equally as important, because in my mind, like my family is as important as like the creation of the Earth. And it reminds me of like some of the stories I love, like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, or The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. Basically, I wanted to make sure the player felt that there was a higher power than themselves, and that there was something watching over them as they went through this story.
No
My dad was super supportive with my college plans, to a point. Things were okay until this terrible accident happened. I guess a forklift flipped over due to a bad axle, and it crushed one of the workers there.
地元の
My dad
男
didn't
性
eat
が
for days, even though he
死
wasn't
んだ
directly
と。
involved. It devastated him. Not only did it hurt the business,
ローカルマン
but it just
シュリ
freaked him out.
書いてますね。
He would talk in his sleep, muttering things about firing people and saying sorry. One fateful day he approached me, said that since my school search wasn't going well, I should finally be a man and take over the family business. He said one day he was going to die, and that all of his work, sacrifice, and even that man's life would be wasted in vain. I just lost it. Teenage me just exploded at the thought. I screwed up. I said things I shouldn't have. He was having a crisis, and I pretty much spit in his face.
多分最後はあの家に向かう気がします。 他ありますかね。すごい悲しい、あれですよね。あ、奥にあった。まあ、言っちゃいけないことを父親にぶつけてしまって後悔した後ですね。これは光の反射だ。でもそうですね。私のお父様も昔、一度だけ本気で喧嘩してしまったことがあったらしいんですけど、基本は父親に頭上がんないあれだったんですけど、父親とか、まあおじいちゃんですね、私から。だからまあちょっとある日喧嘩した後、やっぱりほら喧嘩すると喧嘩のってつくじゃないですか。お父様はしばらくその父親の、まあおじいちゃんの顔が治るまで、その怪我を見てたび、すごいなんかやってしまったってすごい後悔したって言ってましたね。まあそういうお話をお父様もしてましたので、私は逆にお父様にそういう喧嘩になったことはないんですけど。これは、救急車救急車あ、そうか、事故があったって言ってましたもんね。ここから登るんでしょうか。あ、これがトラクター。トラクターじゃない、フォークリフト。なんかフォークリフトが横転してって言ってましたけど。あれが、よいしょ。こっち方面ですね。
Was that the last time you talked to him?
No, I called on holidays, and he would call on my birthday.
うんうん。
I guess we acted like nothing ever happened, which was stupid. Didn't want to ask about his lumberyard, and I'm sure he didn't want to ask about
それが
his
最後のお
job.
別れだったわけじゃなく、お話はできてたんですね。でも
I think the last conversation we had was about what movies we
ただ
had
直
seen,
接会う
what
ことが
exactly
な
the
かっ
best
たっ
boy
てことで
was
しょう
in the
か。
credits. I thought he would be here so much longer.
ことは、もうお話ししないわけじゃないけど、ちょっと気まずいまま、離れてしまって、直接顔を合わせてないままってことですかね、これ。結構気まずいですよね、確かに。
In the distance, the first tree illuminated the wasteland. She couldn't go home anymore. She did the only thing she was capable of. Moving forward. My dad died alone in the middle of the wilderness. I should have been talking to him more. I should have done a lot of things differently.
最後の一匹もダメだったってことです？
If the first tree on earth brought life with it, if it taught the birds to sing and fly and showed saplings how to grow, what could it do for us?
Obviously, this is a really emotional part, but I'm going to talk through it anyway. A lot of people correctly identify that Journey was like a huge inspiration for the first tree. And this part, it is like a callback to that part where you're climbing up the mountain with your friend you don't know, and it just gets snowier and snowier, and you just keep going, and then eventually you collapse. And that part, that made a huge impact on me. And I don't even own a PlayStation 3 or 4. I rented a PlayStation from like a rent-a-center right after completing Home is Where One Starts, just because I'd heard so much about it. And everyone was right, it was a very impactful game, and it definitely inspired the first tree.
これが最初の木、The First Tree ってことですね。救いはないのですか？
There was a letter I received yesterday from a name I didn't recognize, with a quote I can't stop thinking about. Death is not the opposite of life, but a part of it.
死は生の反対ではなくその一部であ
I'm
る。
realizing one important truth. Each of us have our own journey to the first tree. But sometimes I'm not sure I'm ready to take that first step.
You already have my love.
?最後の一匹の結局間に合わなかったってことですよね、これ。 あなたの答えをここに入力してください。え？どう答えたらと。もう光の数が文字数。これしか入れれないですよね。あれ？文字数が入らない。あ、英語じゃないとダメ？私英語苦手なんですけど。うん。そうですね。
I guess her journey was over. But I have no idea. It was only a dream. A distraction from tomorrow.
I don't think dreams normally bring back to memory so many important feelings. Maybe it was just a dream, but it was also a gift.
Yeah, I suppose. But tomorrow we're getting on a plane to the last place on Earth I want to be. The only person that would have made the trip worth it is gone.
You're going to see him and be with him one last time before you say goodbye. I have one last quote for you by Emerson, sealed in an imaginary letter from me to you. It is the secret of the world that all things subsist and do not die, but only retire a little from sight and afterward return again. Go to sleep, my love. We have a big day tomorrow, but I'll be there with you every step of the way.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Good night, Rachel.
Good night, Joseph.
つまりこれは、お父様が亡くなってしまって、その後落ち込んでいる旦那様と奥様の話。その旦那様の夢ってことですよね。
you're probably thinking, what is going on? And that was definitely my intention for this epilogue part of the first tree. This is my favorite part. This is the part I'm most proud of. And it definitely, like, it's supposed to evoke this, like, what is going on? Where am I? I was not expecting this. When I was marketing and blogging about making the game, I never showed anyone this part. I never told anyone. I never shared screenshots. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. And I also wanted it to feel a little creepy because it's totally inspired by those nights where you wake up in the middle of the night and you can just hear the sounds of the wind outside the house and you can't sleep. So you walk around in this like twilight stupor. And I would say the whole first part of this game where you play as the fox, its whole purpose is to set up for this conclusion. So yeah, I would encourage you to look around and see how many things you
まあ
recognize
夢
from the
から起
earlier
きた
part of
現
the
実世
game.
界ですね、これ。
I tried hard to
家族の夢
foreshadow this epilogue just because I
なんで
wanted it to
肝
be a
心
surprise,
の
but I
ここ
didn't
が
want it
字
to
幕
feel
がない
too
の
out
で
of
すか？
place that it would be humorous. And so Joseph earlier in the game, he would say things like, I felt like I was right behind the fox the whole time. In my mind, the camera perspective acts as a metaphor for who the player is, what they're seeing, if the camera represents Joseph, or just like that video game trope of having the camera follow you. I guess the big question I wanted the player to ask themselves, is this a dream as well? And if so, does that even matter?
No treasures 宝はないよ。飛び越えたらできないですね。どこかにいたいのかな、これは。これは起きた後一体どこへ行けば？これはでも夢の中に出てきたものたちでこの乗り物とか。 怖いのはやよ。
You're probably thinking, what is going on? And that was definitely my intention for this epilogue part of the first tree. This is my favorite part. This is the part I'm most proud of. And it definitely, like, it's supposed to evoke this, like, what is going on? Where am I? I was not expecting this. When I was marketing and blogging about making the game, I never showed anyone this part. I never told anyone. I never shared screenshots. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. And I also wanted it to feel a little creepy because it's totally inspired by those nights where you wake up in the middle of the night and you can just hear the sound of the wind outside the house and you can't sleep. So you walk around in this like twilight stupor. And I would say the whole first part of this game where you play as the fox, its whole purpose is to set up for this conclusion. So yeah, I would encourage you to look around and see how many things you recognize from the earlier part of the game.
What the hell?
Ah, 出てきた。え？あ、キツネ？キツネさん？遠いですよね。お父様としたキャンプのテント。
I purposefully fade out the crosshair in the middle of the screen because I wanted it to be a direct callback to the camera following the fox in the first 5 levels of the first tree. I wanted it to go for that gut reaction that this was very familiar yet totally in a different world.
これはあっちがずっと光ってますね。どこへ買ってんでしょう、これ。つめさんどこ行きました？ ひどい。こんな遠くまで来ます？どっち？広すぎて。キツネさんがいないんですけど。これ以上はいけない。わけでもない。まあ、いけない。まだこっちじゃないですね。キツネさんどこ？夜明けてキツネさん消えたんですよね。いや、音楽が聞いたので、多分、私が全然違うとこ行ってる気がするんですよね。明るくな銀色のキツネさんがいなくなったんですよね。一体何があるんです？えらい距離移動しちゃいましたね。多分光ってるのがキツネさんだと思ったら、多分あれ光の反射だったパターンですね。あれ？私そこ降りてきたんですよね。あれ？私そこ降りてきて、明るくなってキツネさんが消えたんですよね。こっちじゃない。多分どこかに連れて行こうとしてくれたキツネさんはどこ？ひたすら山を下ったことしかわかりません。あれどうしましょう。あれどうしよう。移動距離がすごすぎて大ことになってますよ。 番最後になんか私エンディングをやらかした？あれじゃないですもんね。あれ、私山のどこから来ました？私、次化かされました？あれ、どうしましょう。あれ、自宅がない。自宅まで戻ればって思ったけど、自宅がない。確かに、いいところから山を下っていって、金さんについてったはずなんで、金さんが途中で消えちゃったんですよね、周りが明るくなったら。で、目印の光もないので、おかしいなってことになってますね。まあ、こうやって降りてきて、焚き火この辺を私降りてきたんですね。ああ、そうそう、この辺。そう、目の前にああいうのがあって、で、右にキツネさんが行ったと思って追っかけたら、あ、光の筋見つけた。あそこの奥に光ってるのがあります。あれを見失わないように行きましょう。光の柱みたいなもの。光の柱は今画面中央あたりにあるので、あっち方面ですね。こっちで合ってた。あっち側にはそれはしないです。こっちになんか光の柱が。遠くまで当たってたんですよね。私は山の上に行ったからだったのかな。 ちらかな。あった。あれ？ラブカムコム。子供連れてってる。なんか親から子供へのメッセージっぽかったです、今。ただ翻訳は間に合いませんでした。翻訳間に合わなかったけど、多分、でもあれ私のメッセージじゃないですもんね。なんでしょう。世界は綺麗なんですよ。世界は綺麗だし、音楽もとてもいいんですけど、データベースにコメントを提出しますか？ランダムに表示される可能性があります。コメントって好きなやつですか？もしかしてさっき入れコメントがあの木に書かれたりする？はいにしちゃった。まあどっちでもいいですけど。というわけで、ちょっと、になったりしましたね。あれ？最初いましたっけ？この下に。最初いましたっけ？この3匹の方。まあ、でも、まあ、すごい切ないストーリーでしたね。結局のところ、ちょっと子狐さんたちは助けられず、まあでも、そこでもう一度親になったならっていうメッセージ出て、それが他の科に行く。なかなか、面白い試みでしたけど、なんかこう、なんていうの、音楽綺麗だし、世界観もすごいいいんですよ。特に課題もなかったんで、平和、例えば平和なんですけど、字幕、もう少し翻訳どうにかならないんでしょうか。下の夫婦の会話以外わからなかったんですけど。なんというか、こう、もうほぼほぼもう何を言っているかわからないままやしかなかったし、 のせいで余計になんか笑ってることしかわかんなくて何笑うてんねんって思いましたし、しかも最後の子がですね、狼さん前倒れてたところ、あそこだったかな、なんか、ファーストツリーって書いてあったあたりで、やたら、なんか、なんでしょう、このコメント欄クは解説、もしかして、私がこの解説モードってのをオンにしてたからでしょうか。もしかしたら途中の喋ってたのあれもしかしてただの解説だったのでは？だからほら、本来おかしい場面でなんか笑ってたじゃないですか、コメントが。コメント？解説だから、本来2週目で聞くやつだったとかってことですかね、あれ、もしかして。だからもう何笑うてんねんってなってたんですかね。かもしれないですね。あやー。まあ、なので、まあ、なんとかね、最後を終わらせることができました。あれですね。次回をどうしましょう。思ったより早く終わってしまったので、この1回で終わってしまったので、次回は、いや、今考えてるのがいくつもあるんですよね。鹿のゲームか、ごく普通の鹿さんの世界。エゴニファー先輩がやってたところか、もう畑とか街中のキャベツとか野菜を食べ尽くすお腹空いた豚になって、暴れ回るか、そうそう、豚さんになってこう可愛く暴れ回るか、鹿になって暴れ回るか、あとはかっこよく、天使さんとか悪い人たちをスパッパパーっと倒していくかっていう。ちょっと迷ってますね。まあ、平和な世界にするか、平和？まあ。まあ、この辺はちょっと次回どうするか考えている感じですね。というわけでですね、今日のところはこれぐらいでということで、まあ、馬娘さんもそのうちちょっとまた育成したいところですけど、今日はちょっとなんか英語が苦手だったためにすごい不完全燃焼感があるんですけども、今日のところはこれぐらいで終わりたいと思います。というわけで、本日のところは、来てくださってありがとうございます。please subscribe and please follow me、チャンネル登録、高評価よろしくお願いします。というわけでですね、今日のところはこれで、また来週、おつみるでした。ちょっと、次回はちょっと早めにどの世界に行くか聞きたいですね。ではまた、お疲れ様です。おつみるでした。